I have created a monster. This is a Les Paul guitar with 2 sets of frets. Now, how did I do that, you may ask? Well, you know what other guitars have 2 sets of frets? Rock band guitars. So I put a Rock band guitar inside of a Les Paul body so that I could have solo buttons on a guitar that I don't despise. I built this guitar with one reason in mind, one sole motivation, and that was to FC Greengrass and High Tides using the solo buttons. Why would I want to do that, you may ask? Well, solo 2E, the strumming solo in that song, is just barely above the strum limit. It's like hardly possible, or maybe even impossible on NTSC. But there's no strum limit if you don't strum. See, you can just tap these solo buttons as fast as you can, and the game will recognize it just fine, no strum limit involved. So my grand idea was to FC the whole song up to that point, use the solo buttons to hit the strumming section, FC the rest of the song on NTSC, be the first ever to do it, be incredible, all that, but my hopes and dreams slowly died when I realized that that is just simply not even close to being feasible. You can FC it, sure, once or twice in practice, but in a real run, no, it'd be a waste of time. So, luckily, I figured out a different solution. If you didn't see my video yesterday, go check that out. How to make any RGH 360 run at 50 Hz, which, in effect, raises the strum limit, so I don't need to subject myself to countless hours of fucking tapping strumming solos. So, despite my initial intentions not really working out, this guitar has turned out to be one of my favorite guitars I've ever played on. It is very unique, I'm very proud of it, and I just had to show it off to you guys. So, I'm gonna go take it apart and then show you how I made this thing even work. Alright, so here's the inside of the body. Got the 2 sets of frets up there, and all this mess down here. So I'll just start right away with what's on top. I'll start tearing it apart further as we go down. But this is the D-pad board from the Stratocaster. I tried wiring it up to the Les Paul D-pad, which sits under here, but I was unsuccessful. It for whatever reason, it couldn't work. So I just kept this board here, and I have it mounted in a very specific orientation because when I put the cover back on, that will basically fit. I don't have it set up properly, but it'll fit into the battery compartment there. So if I do need to go left or right, I can just take off the battery cover, and do that. Alright, so I just unscrewed the strum bar bracket, custom designed and printed by 760 Creations, Mr. JP himself. This is housing 2 Kalebox Royal Navy strum switches. They feel great, very tactile, they have a great little click to them. And right below it is the custom strum bar, also from 3D printed by 760 Creations. This is the best feeling strum bar that you can possibly ever get. It is incredible. It's like a regular strum bar, except for it has a bit more of an extreme angle to it. If it would focus, there. It's not obvious. I don't have one right next to me that I can show side-by-side comparison, but it feels great. And there's no real good analog that you can compare it to. It just kind of has to be felt to be believed. And just gotta trust me on this. It feels amazing. If you can get a guitar from JP, do it. Spend the money. He does great work. Incredible products. Cannot recommend him enough. So yeah, the wiring on the strum switches is pretty simple. It just goes straight to the main board. One wire for positive, one for negative for each up and down. And what else is there down here? The Xbox button. I tried to hook it up to the main board, but that turned out to be useless. So what I ended up doing, I just put the main board here to keep the board that held the guide button on the Stratocaster down into the same slot. So in here is the actual button itself, and that's the piece that gets pushed down to actually, activate the button. And it's just being held down by pressure when I tighten down that there screw. And it just kind of works. It's not the best solution, but it works good enough. The whammy bar potentiometer need a little bit of adjustment. Turns out the Rock Band Stratocaster uses a slightly different range of values for these potentiometers. So I had to use the built-in Les Paul adjustments, so you can rotate this in the housing if you loosen up these screws here. And I was maxing out the built-in adjustment range, so I had to file a little bit out to turn it just a little bit more, because every time I hit a sustain, it was slightly held down. So I had to just barely move it a little bit more, and now it works just fine. Over here is the effects switch. That's the big thing that sticks out on the Stratocasters and makes stupid noises during guitar solos and stuff. I kept it just because. And I did have it kind of glued in this little area here, but it just keeps falling out because that's kind of where I rested on my on my lap while I play, so turned out not to be the greatest spot for it. I'll have to figure out a different spot to keep it if I ever even want to use it. It's just kind of useless to me. I don't care. And the only other thing down here that's really worth mentioning is the start and select buttons had to just get wired up onto the same board as the D-pad, because this is the start and select button on the Rock Band Stratocaster. So I just had to wire those up, and they're good to go. So that's about it down here. Oh yeah, this is a wired guitar, of course. So I just threw a big old glob of hot glue down there to keep the actual wire from coming out, and I routed the wire through where the sync button was on the Les Paul in the first place. I took out all the boards over here that weren't necessary because I don't need any sort of voice functionality or whatever, and then I don't need to sync this guitar because it's wired. So it just turns out that the wire is just about the same thickness as that sync button used to be. So it worked out nicely. So onto the fret buttons. So these are custom-made fret PCBs created by HDR Rev on GitHub. These were free to use, and I just sent them over to JLC PCB to get a set of 25 printed. So I have a whole bunch of these things, and they mount up with Kale Chalk low-profile switches, and yeah, they work nicely. I just noticed that my orange is slightly raised up. I should fix that, but yeah, these work nicely. These are the only set of mechanical buttons I should ever even consider. I actually have two different kinds in here. These are ones that were supplied to me by 760 Creations, Mr. JP, and these are ones that I had purchased myself. They're basically the exact same thing. His are just slightly different because he uses a different spring in those. And then, of course, underneath the fret mechanical switches are the fret buttons. These are 3D printed ones from XX760XX on Twitter. JP, they're a beautiful design. They have a nice rounded corner to them so you can slide over them nicely. They feel great to play on. I would never use any other fret ever, ever, ever. Don't even bother with 3D printed frets unless you're getting them from somebody like JP. And yeah, the wiring is an absolute disaster. It's very hard to keep all contained in the neck. And since the neck is hollowed out, I needed to hollow out the backside of the neck to even fit all these things in there. I had to use some sort of thing to hold down these the fret buttons, because when you're pushing down on them, the board flexes a bit. I can't really show you that well without the guitar all put together, but when you push it down, the board will flex ever so slightly. So when you're pushing a button, it goes kind of deep into the neck. So I just grabbed a whole bunch more of these of the fret PCBs I have, because I bought like 25 of them, and I just set them on top, and a little bit of a paper towel, and it ends up being just enough to kind of just weight it down enough so that the frets don't go all the way into the body when I push them. Because this is kind of a weird spot, I'm gonna go over to the front to show you exactly how I did this, because it's hard to tell from the inside. So here's how I managed to make the neck work. So this is just the regular neck. However, I filed down the ridges in between the fret buttons, or I suppose you could call these ridges the frets, as they would be on a real guitar. But sanding those down, or filing them down, really makes sliding between the frets a lot easier, especially with these 3D printed buttons. So yeah, I really like doing that. I did it on this other piece too. But how I did this was, I basically just took another neck. I had a spare neck. I cut out the fret portion of it. I cut out a big hole on the other neck here, and I just kind of shoved it in there. And it's not the most graceful job I've done. I kind of really overshot how big the hole was supposed to be, but I covered it all up with electrical tape, and it looks okay. it looks fine and presentable on the outside, but yeah, that's all that matters. And it works. I super glued it in here, so it ain't gonna go anywhere. I used a lot of glue, trust me. And yeah, it's not the most graceful solution, but it definitely works, and it gets the job done, and it holds everything perfectly. One challenge about using these fret PCBs in particular is that they have an 8-pin layout, which is the standard for an Xbox 360 Les Paul. However, the RB1 Stratocaster has a 6-pin layout for all their fret PCBs, with one ground pin shared between both of the boards. So what I ended up having to do, I had to combine the 3 ground pins that are on each of these PCBs into one wire, combine it to the one big long ground wire that goes all the way back to the main board, and I had to do that twice, basically. I had to have that one ground wire go from the main board up to this one, through it, into that one, and then, yeah, there's like a whole bunch of different ground wires all connected to one wire, and it's a real mess. I'm glad it works. It is an absolute fucking nightmare, and I would not recommend this to anybody unless they want to go crazy. So yeah, that's how I built this thing. I didn't expect to like it as much as I do. It's kind of become my main guitar for every game after Guitar Hero 3, because unfortunately this doesn't work on Guitar Hero 3. That's just how the Rock Band Strat compatibility is. It just doesn't work. But for every other game than that, this guitar is excellent. It's stellar. I love it. Thanks again for 760 Creations for supplying all the 3D printed parts. It really pulls the whole thing together. And thank you, the viewer, for watching this video. I'm not only passionate about playing the game, I'm passionate about how you play the game, the controllers you use to play the game. If you don't have a good controller, you simply can't be a good player. There's nothing worse than if your guitar randomly overstrums or if your frets just start dropping. Those misses aren't your fault, and they shouldn't have to happen. So I'm a major proponent of figuring out how to work on your own guitars, fixing them yourselves. Get yourself a soldering iron. Maybe get some cheap strum switches on Alibaba. Switch them out. They're 15 years old. Give them a break. Get some new ones if they're overstrumming. If your fret buttons are getting a bit not great, maybe try swapping in some mechanical ones. It's not as hard as you may think. But anyways, thank you again for watching. I appreciate it. This is kind of a different style of video for me. I do plan on doing a couple more hardware-related videos sometime in the future. I want to make an entire Guitar Hero collection video of mine, showing off all my guitars, all my different cool beta demo disc software things, all sorts of things like that. I've been wanting to do this for a long time. I've been putting it off. There's just so many things, and there's so many more things I want to get before making the video, but it just doesn't seem like there's an end in sight, so I might as well just do it now and just maybe update it later in the future. Who knows? But yeah, look out for a collection video sometime in the future. Now that I've said it publicly, you guys can hold me to account and make sure it actually comes out at some point. But yeah, thank you again for watching. Have a good one. Peace out.